Just talk about how we all see our ongoing disaster that is Perl 5. Here's an overview of our language. So what I've been doing for the last few years is acting as Pumpkin, and this is the job where I am in charge of the language, people like to say, which is totally crazy, and it's not really true. And I've been doing this for a long time. And before I talk about where we are now, I'm going to kind of take us back in time to a simpler, happier time in my life. I had just taken over from Jesse Vincent in 2011, and these are some of my slides from them. I said Jesse and I get along really well, and we both agreed roughly on what we wanted from Perl, how we thought about Perl. Okay, but when we looked ahead and we imagined what the future would be like, we had different visions of where we saw things in the future, how we thought about the future. Jesse gave a talk that was sort of his grand vision for the future of Perl, and it was called Perl 5.16 and Beyond. And this talk was all his hopes and dreams, what Perl could be, where we would go. And the talk that I was giving at the time was called Perl 5 Today, Tomorrow, and Christmas, was about my fears and my anxieties about Perl. So Jesse had one vision of the future, and I had a different one. And I'm proud that I can stand here 5 years later and tell you we have achieved my vision. I spent a lot of time explaining why my job was never to actually do anything. It could all be shunted off to other people to make me look good while I just sat around and ate Doritos. But there's one thing I really did want to do, and I wanted to improve the mailing list's culture. So Perl 5 porters had a reputation for being kind of a wretched hive of scum and villainy. I think it was overblown, but it wasn't completely unreasonable. And I said that what I wanted to do was to call out unreasonable behavior and unreasonable arguments, and to make the culture better. And part of this, what we did was institute the standards of conduct, very simple. Some people think they're too simple, some people think we shouldn't have them, but we do have them. They do have teeth, and I think they have helped to keep Perl 5 porters a better place. Always some people are opposed to this kind of change. Let me say I am staunchly in favor of this sort of thing, of a way of saying that we have a space where we can all work together in comfort. One criticism we got was that we had created a religion of niceness. Oh no. I mean, if the worst thing that somebody's going to call you is the Pope of niceness, you know, that's okay. Other things I talked about at the time was the idea of people having experimental kinds of Perl. People we were adding features to Perl that were experimental, so we could bring things out and throw them away more easily without them becoming critical parts of people's infrastructure. And one of the things we said wasn't just having experimental features, but experimental forks of Perl. So there was an idea of renaming Perl 5 in many different ways, one of which was calling it Pumpkin Perl. That's the mainline Perl that you get from Perl.org. And I said, well, what if we have many variants? If you want to do stuff in Perl that the Perl 5 porters are not sure should go in the main line, you could make your bumpy melon Perl, your green pumpkin Perl. I'm sure these have names. And this one, which I happen to know, is a turban squash. And I really like this idea. I said it was like an experimental feature. You start with Perl and you break stuff, and then you see how great the benefit is compared to the amount of stuff you broke. And if we think that it's a good ratio, then we steal it and we put it back in Perl. And I can say this was a great success. Now, not only do we have Perl, we have pile driver and stable Perl and C Perl, and it's all one big happy family of experimentation. So, success. I also said that in the way that we changed Perl, what we wanted to do was to make Perl more Perlish. And like, how do you make it more Perlish? I said, well, you know, Perl is a construct that is made up of all these individual parts that work together as a seamless, organic whole. But we did make changes, and I think we have succeeded in making Perl more Perlish. We added postfix dereferencing, which lets you get rid of all these awful pieces of syntax where you have to type all these awful punctuation characters that nobody likes. But to stay Perlish, you replace them with ugly syntactic pieces of syntax that different people don't like. It used to be that if you ran this program, you got this message, like forever. I could probably put Perl 5004 there. Well, now, oh, that's great. I've got a FI ligature. That's some good work, Apple. Now we have lexical subroutines. These have not been a really widely heralded feature of the new Perls, but I'll tell you, I've just started using them this year in anger, and they're great. We've added pair slicing. So you can get the values out of an array or out of a set of keys in a hash. Why not get the keys and the values, or the indices and the elements in the array? And it gives us an ability to further show our differentiation from Perl 6 with even more sigil variants. Perl 5 is interesting compared to many other languages in that it doesn't put its types in the variables, but in the operators. So if you want to compare something, your operator tells you what it is and what kind of comparison you're doing, until you get to these guys. This is a place where these operators, the bitwise operators, they looked at your variables to see what the type was. The only problem is the variables didn't know. I don't know, you tell me, man. And how do we solve this problem in Perl 5? We all know by this point, right? More punctuation. So we've added more operators. We haven't caught up to Perl 6 yet. We're going to keep trying. We also finally got rid of the smart match operator. Right? No, it's still there. I mean, we got to leave something for the next guy to do, right? And there's one more big feature that everybody's really excited about. We added improved support for the Mongolian vowel separator. Yeah, that's right. No, I guess the other thing was we added these subroutine signatures, which are pretty keen. And just like our lexical subroutines, this had been sitting in the documentation, right? We left alphanumerics out of prototypes to leave room for formal parameters someday. That was written in 1995. Yes, here we are. Okay, so enough about the past. Let's actually talk about Perl 5.24. I hope I didn't get you too excited about what kind of changes you're going to see, because Perl 5.24 it's a small set of changes. It's a good set of changes. I'm happy with it. But what we see in Perl's life cycle is we have big sets of changes like 5.10 and 5.20, and then we take time for those to kind of get burned in, see how they go. We focus on fixing bugs or speed optimizations, and that's really where we are. I've been working on a new Perl Delta format to kind of catch up with the times and behave the way people expect from our software. So our new Perl Delta features optimizations, bug fixes, and please rate us. Thank you. This is a limited time sale. We will be going up to 99 cents starting soon. No. Okay. So as with every release of Perl, we took some stuff out. Here's a feature that came in a few years ago called auto deref. Now the idea was, if you had this in Perl 5.10, this would be a compile time error. You can't push onto a scalar. And the fix was, and nobody wants to dereference this because you can have a really long structure that is the array ref, and then you have to go back and do circumfix dereferencing, and it's ugly, and syntax ugly, and you're doing jumping around in your code ugly. So what do? We fixed push to say if the operand, the first operand, is an array reference, then dereference it and push onto that. This didn't just work for push, it worked for pop and splice and keys and a bunch of other things. There's a bunch of reasons that it was controversial or people didn't want to recommend it, but in the end what happened was we added postfix dereferencing, which doesn't just solve this problem in 15 built-ins, it solves it everywhere in the language. So if you need to pass an array reference, the contents of an array referenced by an array reference into something, you can use postfix dereferencing. Because of course a subroutine can't tell whether it should be dereferencing or not unless you give it a prototype. And if you only know one thing about prototypes, it's that you shouldn't know anything about prototypes. So the simple change here for your code that's using this is to stop using auto dereference and switch to post dereference. Now, you can't just run that expression in your code, you actually have to go change things. But that's the biggest change, I think, in Perl 5.24. Another thing that got removed from the language is the for loop. No. If you look at this for loop, you're going to see something that you might not notice, and that's we've actually mentioned the topic when we're looping. But we haven't just mentioned $_, we have lexicalized it, and apparently we have indented it a little bit. That's good. We've made it a lexical topic. The lexical topic was an interesting idea. We want to be able to use lexical variables all over the place because we know lexical variables protect us from spooky action at a distance. The problem is that nobody really got into using this feature and understanding how best to use it. What we seem to find from reports on PerlPie Porter's mailing list was that people who used this feature did so by accident. And it turns out that if you have a feature that involves spooky action at a distance that you can accidentally enable or disable, you just get more spooky action at a distance. So that feature has been removed. Something else that we've removed is this feature. Take your time. So what does that do? I don't know. I have no idea what this ever did, but now it throws an exception. Someone said, "What if you say my and then state? Should that one work?" It's why we can't have nice things. Okay. Chdur. So chdur with no arguments goes home. And it used to be that chdur with one argument that is an empty string would also go home. And that meant if someone was passing in a directory and they accidentally screwed up and passed you no directory, you went home and continued running your program. This has been changed after some warnings to behave the same way as the chdur system call, the chdur standard library routine. And this will fail and tell you there is no such directory as a directory with no length. A lot of you have probably seen this slide before, but I really like this slide. Who knows what $H is? Okay, and how many of you have used $H? You're bad people. So $H is where warnings and strict tell you which warnings and strictures are on. But it is a little known fact that you can also refer to that variable like this. Now this is a keynote bug, and I apologize for that. What I've actually done is I've typed in a $, and then a backspace character. Who can tell me the printable representation of backspace? It's Control H. Yeah, so any of these variables that start with a hat, you can use the control letter character. So you want to talk about Control hat T, you could just say $hat T, you could say $Control T. And if your editor let you put that into your program, first of all, report the bug to the editor, maybe. And secondly, it worked. Now, that's been removed after a period of deprecation, and I will tell you, we got some bitter complaining. I was using that in production, and you broke my code for no reason.
Obviously old Tico.
Yes, obviously old Tico's users. I guess I can't give you a great reason that we removed. Actually, I can, but it's a boring reason, so nobody wants to hear it. But really? Really? Okay. So those are the things we've taken out. And now I'm even more excited to tell you we're going to keep taking stuff out. Eventually, this language is going to look like Python with $signs. It's going to be great. Okay. Here we've opened a file handle. And we've said when we write to this file handle, we want all the characters to get encoded into UTF-8 bytes. And then we call syswrite to send output to the file handle. Syswrite bypasses Perl.io. So you're saying it's safe to send characters to this. And then you're like prying the safety off and sticking the stuff in here. And the behavior you actually got was too complicated to fit on this slide, but it was fantastic. And so we've removed it. You can no longer, you now get a warning when you syswrite to, send to, sysread from, or receive from a UTF-8 flagged file handle. It basically says, look, if you want to use syswrite and sysread, don't put Perl.io layers on there. Certainly not ones that are going to say it's encoding or decoding. Okay, here's a nice little quiz. What does this match? This one's easy. It's okay. 1 through 8 digits. Yeah, that's right. Right? I don't put tricks in my slides. So this matches between 1 and 8 digits. And this one, right? This matches 1 digit. How about this one? So yeah, this matches a digit and then a left brace and a right brace. right? Well, obviously you haven't been using the meta character function, so you must want the other function. We're working on fixing this. It's deprecated, but what we found out is that deprecations don't go deep enough. There are still cases where you don't get a warning. But this is going to go away. And the simple rule is this. If you're using it for the sake of having quantification or parameterization for meta characters that take parameters like \b or \n, then you use it like this, but with something in the braces, right? And if you're using it to mean a literal brace, you escape it. And if you start doing that now, you'll never see the warning. Okay, now I've just gone through a lot of stuff that we removed, and I want to tell you that we don't just take away, we also give. And we are taking the rare step this year of undeprecating things that we promised to remove, and we said you can keep them. So this is pulling out the file handle part of a glob. If you don't know what a glob is, it's like a hash with a crayon stuck up its nose. It used to be that if you wanted the I/O part out of a glob, you could say this, but remembering I/O, it's not enough typing. So you could also say file handle. And then you'd get a warning, and this warning had been there for just years and years and years, saying, we're going to remove that sometime. And we said, all right, it's time, let's finally remove it. And then we thought, wait, what's the point? It's going to break code, and we're not like going to invent a new thing called file handle and put it there. So in our great mercy and generosity, we return to you a glob entry. Enjoy it. Now that's, okay, admittedly not really big and exciting, but something that will probably excite a lot of the people here. We have finally restored to Perl 5.24 in the year 2016 Amiga support. Do we have any Amiga users? Of course we do. Okay. Unicode 8. So Perl 5.24 now supports Unicode 8. Super exciting to me. For example, we support ahum, the ahum script. Now, this isn't a joke. I'm actually really excited for a couple of reasons. Now, first of all, if you are one of the ahum people or you are Assamese, this is obviously interesting because it means you can write your language into a computer, right? That's a big deal. And I'm not joking. Really think about this. You are a person who couldn't type your language in a computer, and now you can. Amazing. Now, I am not Assamese, so this is interesting to me for a different reason. The ahum people live here in Assam, which is in this little part of India to the east of Bangladesh. And I came here to see where do they use the ahum script. And I realized that I hadn't ever really looked at a map of India in isolation before, and I was amazed. I found out that Bangladesh was really trapped into India. Of course, I felt ignorant not knowing this, but I was still excited to learn. And then I saw Kashmir, and I thought, I wonder, what kind of script are they using in Kashmir? And apparently, Kashmiri, now they speak a lot of Urdu there, which is, of course, right, written in Perso-Arabic, but Kashmiri is written Sharada, which looks like this. And that entered Unicode in 6.1, along with all these things, right? Like Sora Sompeng, what's going on? And so the thing is, why is ahum interesting? Because when you look at these changelogs, you go to Wikipedia, and you can just browse for days learning about the amazing human cultures that exist because Unicode is slowly incorporating all of their languages, and it's totally fantastic. So I strongly encourage you to read the Unicode deltas and then just go to Wikipedia and waste your employer's money like crazy. Now, that's enough. I'll get back to other things that were important about Unicode 8, like lowercase Cherokee, right? What's up with that? Why they had capitals in Unicode 3, so like we could go to Wikipedia right now and find out. The reason that most people are excited about Unicode 8, of course, is the taco. We're waiting for the selectors so we can pick flour or corn. I don't care to use the corn tortilla emoji. It doesn't feel right. There was actually a really bit of exciting emoji work in Unicode 8, and that is the diversity system. So here's a Perl 5 program that I wrote, and we start off by saying we're going to get a character here called man. Man represents a man. It's a guy. And then we get the emoji modifiers, the Fitzpatrick modifiers. Fitzpatrick numbers define skin tones. And the Unicode Consortium had a really good idea here, which is we're not going to try and name skin tones on our own. We're going to go use existing standards because that's going to be a minefield. So they pick the standards, and then you can use these to create variants of Unicode glyphs. Then we make a heart. So this is the black heart from pre-emoji days, plus a character that says, like an emoji, and a kiss. And the zero-width joiner lets us take these emojis and stick them together into combined emojis. So here we've got a dude, and he's got loving and kissing some dude, and maybe this one guy has type 1 skin, and someone else has type 6 skin, and you can start building emojis like this. And just as important as it was to be able to support people writing in their own language, we want people to be able to have identification with what they're writing. And if nothing looks like you or acts the way you and your people act in the writing system, an emoji, I guess, is a writing system, you're disempowering people. And Unicode 8 is really amazing for adding this stuff. Now, technically, I could go on and on about how they've done it, and I'm kind of grumpy about it. But having added this is really fantastic stuff, and you can do all this work in Perl 5.24 now with Unicode 8. Okay, optimizations. I should probably optimize. I think I'm going a little over now. Subroutine calls, notoriously slow in Perl, now less notoriously slow. Matching a fixed string is faster. Adding and subtracting is faster. So it turns out when we added 64-bit support, everything got slowed down because you had to check what kind of integers you were adding. Much of this has been short-circuited. Shifting. Okay, so you're shifting stuff around. If you shift right by some enormous number, you are now shifting towards 0. When bits fall off the end, they fall off the end and become 0. This used to be dependent on the platform and compiler you were using. Now Perl specifies bits off the end go to 0. They don't modulus wrap around ever. Similarly, we standardized negative shifting. This used to be, well, I don't know, what is it? Whatever your platform does. Negative shifting to the left means positive shifting to the right, and vice versa. The only thing you need to keep worrying about is shifting to the left a large amount. You still need to know not the behavior of your platform per se, but the size of your integers. Okay, speaking of really large numbers, this thing to let you truncate a file, you can now truncate files over 4 gigs in size. So, you know, we're still catching up with fat in some ways. Or this one. This is a great one. So who here has used this construct, getting the line of the file you're being called from? Like everybody, right? It tells you where in your program the current subroutine got called from. Well, who has ever tried doing this? Probably, again, everybody. When it's being called from line 3,647,993,10, right? That's fewer than I would have thought. You got a negative number. Now you don't get a negative number. You just get a really funny look. Okay, so this construct is not super common, but it's useful and pretty common. This lets you say, I want a list that consists of the element 1 2 times. And that we haven't changed that. If you wrote this, Perl no longer crashes. It just uses all your memory. Every year I get to say that. That's the one thing I'll miss. Every year I would get to say, Perl no longer crashes, it just uses all your memory. And I don't know why, I really enjoy that change. One more change everybody's going to benefit from. This no longer crashes. So that happened. Maybe about one last thing, I think. Perl-I. So more commonly seen as PerlPie. So if you haven't used this, go read about it. It's a fantastic construct for one-liners. It lets you edit a file in place on your disk. You give it an expression to change lines of the file after E, and then it replaces the file on disk with a new file, but there was a bug. So here I've gone ahead and I've made a 10 megabyte disk image, the smallest disk image you can make on OS X. And I dump into it 2.5 million lines. Each line has the numeral 1 and a new line. So that file is going to be 2.5 million lines or 5 million bytes. I've used up half of my storage. Then I write a PerlPie. I'm sorry, this is probably pretty small. I write a PerlPie that replaces every numeral 1 with numerals 1 and 2. It's going to double the size of the file. Now, it's going to run out of space. Not only because a file, the 5 million times 2 is 10, but because the old file is sitting there while the new one is being built, and then it gets replaced. So we start making this new file. We can't because we run out of space writing the doubled size of it, and we report error. And then we go back and we say, okay, so how's my old file doing? I'm sorry I couldn't edit it. And it's like, oh, it's no problem. I mean, I did have to throw away 3/4 of it. But it's cool because what's left is what you wanted. So you run this now, and you will get the correct answer, by which I mean your old file is still there. Okay, actually, it's one. Yeah, I was really happy with this. This took us 2 versions to get in place, and it was worth doing. We had some other related improvements in 5.22. This is the last thing I'm going to talk about because I think this is the great capstone to talk about the end of all the stuff I've gotten to work on. And that is Perl 5.24 introduces full Perl 6 compatibility. So I only know a little bit of Perl 6, but I managed to write a Hello World program. And we can take this program and we run it through Perl. And this is Perl, right? This is not Perl 6. This is Perl 5.24, and it prints out Hello World. So pretty amazing to have gotten all that working. There's one change you have to make. You have to go back to your program and put Perl 6 in the shebang line. And if you do this, Perl 5 will seamlessly exec a Perl 6 interpreter, and your program will run. So that's all I have to say. Perl 5.24, as I said, not an incredibly feature-packed release, although the Perl 6 thing is going to be pretty big on Reddit. You can get Perl 5.24 now, and usually I would now talk about what's going to be new in Perl 5.26. That's going to be coming out in spring, I guess. It's probably going to have some features. I don't know. I'm done. Hey, sorry, come here. Come here. Come here. Yeah, come here. Come here. Come here. I'm not going to hug him. I'm not going to hug him right now. Yeah. Jesse. So I got that from Jesse, and so that's the real deal. So don't lose it. There's one last thing. The thing I can tell you because I already know it's going to be merged. We will have Unicode 9 support. It is not as exciting as Unicode 8, but it does add support for pancakes and whiskey. So. Right. So I don't know, how are we in time? Can I take any questions? Anybody in a staff shirt? I don't know, do we have any questions? Yes, one question.
Unicode 9 comes out next month, can't we?
No, we can't retrofit Unicode 9 into.
No, but can't we change when
Yeah, so the question is, can we change the release date to match Unicode 9? And basically no, because we could shift over a little bit so that we could release Perl right after the new Unicode came out. But we want time to test how things work with a new standard in place. Okay, so that's everything. I'll be talking again tomorrow, and I'll talk even more about Unicode, so it's going to be great. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to no.
See if this works today.
Work. Good afternoon. Howdy. There are some conversations that you have that you never forget. In October 2011, I was at home in Tokyo having lunch with Jesse Vincent. He was PerlPie Pumpkin. He was in Tokyo speaking at YAPC Asia. He was speaking on Perl 516. He was so excited about it. He was talking about his vision for the future. And then at the end of lunch, he says, "You can't tell anybody, but I'm stepping down as Pumpkin." I was horrified. There are very few people qualified to be Pumpkin, and I had no idea what they were going to do. By coincidence, Jesse wasn't the only person staying with me. Ricardo Signes was in Tokyo. He was speaking at YAPC Asia on email and how it hates the living. And it came to pass at Halloween in 2011 that he took over the pumpkin from Jesse and became our Pumpkin. He's a well-respected member of the community, a Perl expert. He's passionate about Perl 5. He's pragmatic, polite, and professional. He got us through 516, 18, 20, 22, and 24, and it is my great pleasure to ask him to come back. I know. I'm so glad you didn't leave. And to go over to Dan so that we can present you with a small token of our appreciation for all the work you did. Ricardo Signes. Give him a clap. Woo! Yeah, you can sit now. Thank you.
Obviously, I made the build go.
So I don't think that you can actually see what this says, but it says, Ricardo Signes, with appreciation and of your service as Perl 5 Pumpkin, presented by the Perl Foundation, June 21st, 2016. The cups themselves say RJBS, the pause ID, and on the back it has a list of the releases that you put out, and on the dates that you put them out. So.
Okay, so a few years ago, I had an opportunity to come to the Orlando Pro Workshop, and